Hey everyone, Laura K483 here, and it has been a while since I have done one of these videos, but I am super excited to be doing another game review. Now, before we start, I was given this key for free for the purposes of this review by Ubisoft and Seagate Gaming. Now, most of the games I've been lucky enough to receive a key for the purposes of doing a review in the past, I either didn't enjoy or I had fun playing them, but I didn't really feel a burning urge to return to them once I'd put in enough hours to write or film the review. Today's game, however, is a completely different story. Since starting it, it has been so hard to stick to my normal stream schedule of games, because I just want to keep diving back into this one, but I couldn't play it on stream because I had to keep it a secret until today. I'm reviewing the Ubisoft game that released just at the end of 2020, Immortals Fenyx Rising. First, I'll go over my general opinions about the game, then give it individual scores in categories like gameplay, graphics, storytelling, creativity, replayability, and soundtrack, since these are the things I care about most in a game. Then I'll give it an overall score out of 10. This game is an open-world RPG set in the Greek mythology universe, and you play as a character named Fenyx, which you also get to customize to some degree with the character creation menu. One of the only remaining humans who hasn't been cursed by the evil Typhon. Together with the help of Hermes, it is your job to save the fallen gods and defeat Typhon and free the mortals from their curse. One of the trailers for this game described it as a cross between Breath of the Wild and Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and that's a pretty bang-on description. I'll get a little more into that later, though. Right away, this story appealed to me because I've always been super into Greek mythology ever since I was a kid. Any mythology, really. Norse, Egyptian, I loved all of it. I even have a super fancy illustrated mythology encyclopedia in my book collection. And this game has so much fun dialogue and little Easter eggs for all those mythology nerds just like myself. I played on my PC, and the game was pretty easy to pick up, and very quickly I was drawn in by the world, and I could see myself just exploring for hours. Now, this is a challenge, as usually I love RPGs, but not when they're open world. I get very overwhelmed with a lack of direction, I get sidetracked really easily, sometimes I just get plain lost, and overall I usually end up more likely to abandon these games for those reasons. And I never really get that deep into the story. Between how gorgeous this world looked and how much I enjoyed the Greek lore setting, that wasn't much of a risk this time. I've put about 10 hours into this game already, and I cannot wait to play more. This game also satisfies both my taste for combat balanced with puzzles in terms of its actual gameplay, and that's the first specific category we'll dive into. But before we do that, there is one little elephant in the room. It may even be right behind me, actually. When people say this game is like Breath of the Wild, it's more than a little similarity. In many aspects, I have to say this does just feel like Ubisoft wanted to put a Greek skin on Breath of the Wild and have their own version of that game. The first few hours, it's very hard to find much to differentiate them aside from the universe. Both are open world, they have visual similarity in their design, both have an identical stamina system your character deals with in exploring that world, both have miniature dungeons that you solve puzzles to get some rare loot. In Breath of the Wild you have shrines, in Immortals you have rifts. They both have a similar mount taming system, and the characters even open treasure chests the same way. In terms of story, even how you go about defeating Typhon is similar to facing Calamity Ganon, except instead of divine beasts, you're saving fallen gods who will come help you when it's time for the final fight. And once you finish the prologue and tutorial dungeons, both games pretty much just give you the 4 cardinal directions of those 4 beasts or gods and then just let you go at it, however you want. As you progress into the game, though, you start to find more differences that help separate it from Breath of the Wild, and all of these are pretty solid differences in my opinion. The first being no pesky weapon durability. I think we can all agree that is probably the worst part of Breath of the Wild. The second is that Immortals Rising has an interesting skill tree you can develop, as well as upgrade your weapons rather than just continuously finding newer, stronger ones. This game also has 2 narrators that add so much to the experience, and literally made me laugh out loud while I was playing. But more on them later. The entire upgrade and character buff system is actually pretty awesome, and really encourages you to collect the game's various items and currencies. Here's another major difference. All these collectibles and side quests actually feel useful, and have so much more direct ties to strengthening your character for the final battle, rather than here's 900 Korok seeds you can find just to take up your time and get a little more inventory space. Aside from differences such as these, I will say if I were directly comparing this game, I would easily say I like it better because it's not a Zelda game. Don't get me wrong, the Zelda franchise is one of my favorite franchises of all time, and I have most of the titles in that universe. The problem with Breath of the Wild is it doesn't feel like it belongs in that universe. Between the open world, the simplicity of the dungeons, and missing the super powerful musical score, and a little bit of direction that most of the games give you, Breath of the Wild's a great game, it's just not a great Zelda game. Fenyx Immortals Rising doesn't have that history to live up to. It's its own game in a brand new setting, and that means I enjoy it way more, and I'm not constantly comparing the experience. I'm just sitting back and having a good time. Now, let's break it down by category, shall we? Starting off with gameplay. As I said before, I was playing on my PC. This game was super easy to pick up, very smooth to play. The combat flows pretty effortlessly, and as you upgrade your character and spec into different parts of your skill tree, you can unlock some really powerful combos that are fun and satisfying to pull off. There are also the classic dodge and parry elements, but you don't need to be perfect at either of them to make use of them and enjoy the combat. So many games with those mechanics, I find you need to have incredible precision with your timing, and that's definitely not my strong suit, which if you watched any of my live streams, you know for sure that's true. I played with mouse and keyboard. I could see this being just as smooth and enjoyable on a controller, so whether you play on PC or console, I would give the gameplay a 9 out of 10. Only things taking away from the full 10 are how similar it is to Breath of the Wild, and the stamina system, as per usual, isn't hard to work around, but does still end up being quite annoying most of the time. Next, the graphics. This game has a very stylized look, again, kind of similar to Breath of the Wild, but slightly different, and it is beautiful to look at. It's one of the things that just makes you happy to run around and explore the world, and the short animations when you get a powerful item or do any upgrade are either gorgeous to look at or super fun and humorous. The only time it falls short for me is cutscenes with close-ups of characters during dialogue. There's kind of an uncanny valley thing happening where the voice acting is pretty good, but the characters' faces just can't show the same emotion and it doesn't really match. And it's a bit weird to see somewhat deadpan faces and mouths that don't move as much as they should, while the characters are delivering impassioned or emotional lines. For that, I also give this a 9 out of 10. Next, storytelling. Since this game is open world, once you're past the prologue, you would think there isn't much the game actually does in this department, and just leaves you to it. But you would be wrong. Early in the game, it sets up two narrators, one of which is telling the story of Fenyx to the other. These, of course, are prominent characters in Greek mythology. I won't spoil exactly who it is for you, although if you've been reading the subtitles in my gameplay footage, you probably already know. Most games I can think of with narrators, they're useless or annoying, and you just want to mute them as soon as you can. But these two are absolutely hilarious and bring so much to the game, probably one of the most unique things about it, to be honest. And their little tidbits that relate to Greek lore also just tickle my inner mythology nerd. At one point, they even did something at the end of the prologue that was so hilarious, I legitimately was laughing loud enough it was audible throughout my house. Their sense of humor is also shared by most of the characters in the game, gives it a very fun and refreshing feel. Plus, the game gives you just enough direction and quest kind of linear help when you need it to keep you on the main path if that's what you want in your experience, which I appreciated. I give this game a 10 out of 10 for storytelling. Next category, creativity, is where they start to lose marks. We've already covered why. It's a fact that you cannot escape the Breath of the Wild similarities while playing. It's still a phenomenal game. It would be even better if it didn't keep making you think of another title, and at times almost feel like a downright clone. Thank God for some of those additional features I mentioned earlier, otherwise this would be in very dangerous copycat territory. So for creativity, I give it a 4 out of 10. In terms of replayability, this is always very high in an open world game, since there's usually just so much to find and do and explore, but this game I think has a bit of an edge since it also has the skill tree component for your character Fenyx. This means you could do one playthrough where maybe you're a close-up and heavy melee-focused character, but then you could play it again as a distance and range-focused character. Do a run maybe with no weapon upgrades, found weapons only. Maybe a run without god powers other than the ones necessary to complete the game. I could see someone who loved the game doing lots of different runs and trying a different challenge or flavor every time. And for that, I give it a 10 out of 10. Last but not least, the soundtrack. I had very high hopes for this because as soon as I opened the menu and loaded the game, the score was just so gorgeous and ethereal, also having almost a tribal vibe. It was very cinematic at times. I kind of just wanted to sit in the menu and listen to it. If you're wondering what it would sound like, you've actually been listening to it for the entirety of this video, as I've had music from the game in the background of the review. The overall score reminded me very strongly of what James Horner wrote for the movie Avatar, and I think that score is genius and beautiful, and I listen to it all the time. And whenever any cinematic moments are happening, the music continues to live up to this standard. There isn't much, however, when you're running around exploring or doing basic gameplay. It would be nice if a lighter but still just as fun or powerful piece of music were woven into these moments. I give the soundtrack a 7.5 out of 10. Now, if we average all those out, we get an 8.1 out of 10. And honestly, from a subjective opinion, I would happily give this game an 8 out of 10. Really, if it weren't for the fact that it's just so damn similar to Breath of the Wild and the lack of facial expression on the characters, I would have no problem giving this game a full 10 out of 10. I had a blast playing it, I still have tons left to do, and I cannot wait to play more. Thank you again to Ubisoft and Seagate for giving me a key and a chance to review this game. If any of you have played this game, what are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below, I'd love to hear it. See you next time, and if you want to join in on the fun live at any point, join me on my Twitch stream. Bye! I would happily give this game an 8 out of 10.